Alright, hello and welcome to another episode for MC Airsoft. I'm Mark, and today we're going to be talking about what is, in my opinion, probably the best kind of weapon for Airsoft. I'm not going to say it's a class of weapon or anything like that, but it's basically an SPR. First we're going to talk a little bit about what I am calling an SPR, because in military terms, they're a little bit different, right? In military terms, it can be quite a few different things. The Mark 18 is an SPR. The Mark 12 is also an SPR. So the M14 kind of can fit into that category. Anytime you're building a rifle to fill a specific niche or role or whatever you want to call it, that's going to be an SPR. In military terms. Now, in airsoft terms, what an SPR is generally is something like this. Now, this is specifically a Mark 12 SPR in military terms as well, but in airsoft terms, it is something like this. It is a longer gun, generally, but it's really how you build it out on the inside that's going to dictate what it is. So it's SPRs and airsoft, obviously, again, like I said, you can do a Mark 18 SPR. But generally speaking, it's referred to, SPRs are referred to as a kind of medium between your standard AEGs and your DMRs, right? DMRs meaning that it is a designated marksman rifle, generally a higher FPS, and it's kitted out for accuracy and range. The problem with those is you get a minimum engagement distance, let's say 100 feet. Obviously your field or your event is going to vary. Let's say it's 100 feet, maybe 550 FPS cap, or 500 or 450 depending on where you are, but say it's 100 feet and 550. So the SPR kind of fills the gap, because to me, what an SPR is, you're shooting under the 400 mark, you're shooting within your AEG limits, your standard rifleman kind of limits. Generally in the States, that's 400. Some places are 350, like indoor fields, but that's kind of where that is. Let's call it 400 for sake of argument. So the goal is, and you'll see these a lot more at outdoor fields or longer range fields than you'll see it at CQB fields or indoor fields. The goal is to push as close as you can to being a DMR without the FPS increase, right? So they fill certain roles, generally they're kind of the recce rifle kind of setup, where it's something that you're going to take on long range reconnaissance patrols, long range in airsoft, right? Because most of us, aren't walking 20 miles a day to do reconnaissance, right? So they are your Mark 12 kind of builds, your longer barreled M4s or M16s, things like that, generally speaking. You can also build them on a Dragunov kind of platform if you're running below that threshold when you cross into DMR territory. You can run them, you can make RPKs into them because they have the longer barrel, which in theory gives you more accuracy. Although how much more accuracy, that's going to depend on your setup. But generally they are longer, they're around M16 length. You could build out a standard AK into one, that's fine. Bullpups make easy recce rifle kind of SPR kind of setups because they already have a longer barrel, but they're a shorter package. Although upgrades for them are generally trickier, so maybe not as easy. Your full length G36s, not the Cs, but the full length G36s, you can do them. it really depends on your platforms. The only ones that you really can't are your like your CQB guns. Like I wouldn't try and make the Mark 18 running a standard 9 to 12-inch barrel, something like that. I wouldn't make that into a SPR, because really it's going to take a lot more effort and upgrades to do that. Now, of course, you can go hop on board with Crytek or whatever. I have no personal experience with those, but from what I've heard, they make pretty good kind of SPR builds, especially if you get the like DMR ones with longer barrels. But there's a lot of great platforms out there. My personal preference is in the M16 platform, meaning a full-length barrel, full-length stock, non-adjustable, which might get swapped out, but honestly, it fits perfectly to where I would want a M4 anyway. So, and it came with the full stock, and the Marine Corps issued Mark 12 had a full stock, so I'm kind of okay with that. So why is the SPR, in my opinion, the best? The best option in Airsoft. Now, what I will say is that it is not the best at everything, right? It is kind of, to me, the Swiss Army knife, when you can play, as long as your FPS limit doesn't change, you can play pretty much anywhere with it. A lot of the fields here in Arizona or Vegas area don't allow you to go over that 400 FPS cap. Some of them are indoor, some of them not. So you can play with it pretty much anywhere, which is great. Because once you break that 400 threshold, really limits the amount of places you can play, and then also the places that you can play practically. Because yes, you might be able to break that 400 FPS, but if the entire field is close quarters, you're not going to have a great time with that. Because you have to deal with minimum engagements, you're going to have a pistol on you to clear rooms, or an SMG or something like that. It means that you can play pretty much anywhere, which is great. And it gives you the range and accuracy to contend outdoors while still having the FPS to go indoors. Now, obviously, you might want to go with a shorter barrel if you're going to be doing mostly indoors, shorter barrel, shorter buttstock, but you still want to keep it fairly long. I would say that 16 to 20 inch, depending on where you primarily play. Obviously, if you're playing outdoors for the most part, like woods ball kind of stuff, you can run a longer barrel, and that's great. If you're playing mostly indoors, then run a shorter barrel. Easy day. So you can play pretty much anywhere, and you're still competitive outdoors, and you can still kind of clear corners, clear buildings indoors. It doesn't put you at a massive disadvantage like switching to a pistol or something like that does. Generally speaking, I understand there's some highly modded high kappas and all that, whatever. Pistols, in my opinion, always put you at a disadvantage. So you can clear buildings, and you can reach out and touch, and you can fill gaps, right? So if you have a team, then maybe one guy is on the SAW, one guy's on a DMR, one guy is a grenadier of some kind, and then the rest of you have a rifleman. Well, if you have a SPR, if you can go full auto, you can probably keep up range with the support weapon, the like SAW or whatever they're running, but you can go full auto, unlike the DMR. Who could probably outrange the SAW. So you can fill in the support weapon. You can also fill in the DMR role or play a spotter role with the DMR, because you can kind of reach out and touch, right? You're going to outrange most AAGs on the field that aren't built for it. And then as far as the grenadier goes, carry grenades, whatever you need to do for that. You can even do an SPR build onto with an underslung grenade launcher if you really wanted to. But at that point, it's kind of getting away from what we're calling an SPR, which is more of like a squad marksman rifle rather than a designated marksman rifle. Another great thing is if you're going to mil sims, a lot of mil sims do restrict DMRs or don't allow DMRs, like Cartel Wars happening next month, which is August 2021. We're in July 2021. As far as I could tell from the rule set, DMRs are no-go, but an SPR is fine, right? So now I might be wrong on the rule set, but there are some milsims that restrict your DMR usage to maybe one per squad or even one per company, depending on the milsim you're going to. And especially if you're dealing with bolt action rifles and things like that, that's generally pretty restrictive, unless you're doing open play kind of stuff. So yeah, so SPR, it fills all the roles that you need it to. It can clear buildings, it can reach out and touch. It doesn't do any of them great, but you know, if I'm only down like 25 feet on a DMR, now granted slower projectile, but sure, if I'm only down 25-30 feet on range, I can cover that with movement. Especially if I've got a squad with me, I can walk that, right? I can run that. It's not a huge deal. And if I get close enough, I can get into their minimum engagement distance, force them to switch to a pistol where I can still have an SPR. So it's just a universal platform. Now, granted, again, it's not the best at anything, but it's really good at everything if you build it right. So obviously, you know, Mark 18s are going to rule the indoors, whereas Mark 12s are not. But, you know, that's really up to you and what you want out of your rifle. If you only play indoors, just build out an SPR or build out a Mark 18. But if you're playing at a lot of different fields, or you're playing at fields that have a mix, maybe look into an SPR. Now, how do you get it to be an SPR? Well, first you got to go with the right platform, like we were talking about, something with a decent length barrel. It doesn't need to be, you know, 26 like some of the bolt guns, but you're going to need a decent length barrel for some tighter grouping, because in my experience that does affect it. Other people's experiences, well, that's their experience. But in my experience, long tight bores have better groupings than your shorter non-tight bores. So on tight bore, you want to go through, make sure your compression is up to spec, right? Your compression is solid, so you're not getting as much variation shot to shot. Then you want to make sure your nozzle's good and all of that. Then make sure your FPS is as close to the field limit as you can get without going over, and assume that the chrono is going to read high, right? So got the hiccups. My suggestion is 10 FPS less to 20 FPS less, depending on how much you want to gamble with that. But you want to push it close to that limit of FPS. You want to make sure that your drivetrain is very reliable. Your trigger response is adequate, right? You don't want to have to wait for it to wind up. Like if you buy a lot of the cheaper end guns, and you have a cheaper motor or slower motor, you're going to have to wait for it to speed up, which can mean you miss that shot if it's a limited opportunity. Micro triggers are good. You know, there's one in this one, not one in this one. They're good-ish. I don't think they're really necessary. I don't think lipos are necessary. Personally, like as far as the power source, the drivetrain, the motor, all the other bits, reliability is king. And then you're going to want a good hop-up unit. So this one I had to replace the hop-up in anyway, so I went over to the Max Pro. It's a good hop-up. It's R-hopped, not necessary. Do not pay someone to do an R-hop, do it yourself. It's really easy. You get the little piece patch, whatever, from Evike. It's $3. Drop it in there. Super glue, all that good stuff. But you want to make sure you have a good hop-up unit. You want to make sure you're running heavy BBs so you get the good grouping, good accuracy. Yeah, your flight times are going to be down, but you want to make sure you're running heavy BBs under your field's dual limit if you do that, which everyone should be doing. And then you're going to want to make sure that your nozzle fitment is good and you got a good rubber for your hop-up. Really, what you're looking to do is replicate the DMR builds in a smaller caliber rifle, or whatever caliber rifle you want, as long as it's not like a pistol caliber for the milsims and things like that. But you're looking to as closely replicate the DMR builds while staying under the FPS limit for your normal rifleman. And so, yeah, there's a lot of ways to do that. Look into it further. I might do a breakdown as I get more parts into that. I'll probably talk about that more. That's the general idea and why I think the SPR is the best option in Airsoft. If you disagree, put it down in the comments. We'll talk about it there, or I'll talk about it in further videos. But that's just my opinion. But until next time, stay safe, stay hydrated.